Hi, I'm Demi Stevens, founder and CEO of You're the Book Press and editor-in-chief of Self Pub Magazine. We're here in the studio today with Dr. Chrissi Hart. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Demi.
Tell us a little bit about your books.
I have 4 books in print at the moment. My first book, Under the Grapevine, A Miracle by Saint Gendaeus of Cyprus, is a true story about my grandmother who was healed miraculously through the prayers, intercessions, to a very special saint called Saint Gendaeus, who is a very well-known, beloved saint in Cyprus, which is my birthplace. That's where I was born. And this is a true story about how she was miraculously healed when she was only 5.
So this story has been in part of your family heritage then?
It has.
How old were you when you first heard the tale?
You know, I don't remember when my mother started to tell me that story, but I do remember when I was a teenager hearing it. And of course, when I thought about writing this book,
Cleopatra.
Then I went back to my mom and I was calling her from the States, from here, and she lives in London, England. So I'd be calling her and asking her more and more details, you know. And I remember she was on holiday in Cyprus when I was finishing writing the manuscript. And her sister was very sick at that time, and it seemed kind of silly me asking her, well, what color was the roof, you know, and what animals did your grandparents have? And she was getting kind of irritated with me, but I really needed to know all the details, you know, about the story.
She must have been so surprised to see the book come, though.
Yeah, I think she was, but I think she was very happy that I wrote it.
I think there's got to be a level of disbelief at first.
Yeah.
Oh, what color was the roof?
Yeah.
But to see it and hold this gorgeous hardback in hand.
Yeah.
Wow, what a moment.
It was a lovely moment to have that. And in fact, my husband, unbeknown to me, bought the cover illustration as a Christmas gift for me.
Oh.
And it's a very special illustration because I did not have a photograph of my grandmother as a young child, but I looked like my grandmother and my daughter looks just like me. So the picture here is of my daughter. I'd sent a picture of my daughter to the illustrator, and so it's a special picture here because it's really my daughter's picture that's on the front cover.
But set to look like a grandmother.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that's amazing. Which book came second?
So the second one is The Hermit, the Icon, and the Emperor. And that's the story of a very famous icon painted by the evangelist Luke. It's a very famous icon because it's one of the first 3 pictures or paintings that he did, we call them icons in the Orthodox Church, of the Mother of God. And the story is a true legend, and it's an older story than the first one that I wrote about. And this famous icon has a name. It's called the Gikotissa, because it is housed in a very famous monastery in Cyprus called Gikos Monastery. And the legend is that it was housed originally in the Emperor's Palace in Constantinople, which is now called Istanbul, of course. And it's the story of how it came from the Emperor's Palace 1,000 years ago to Cyprus. And it's a truly miraculous story about a governor called Butamitis who worked in Cyprus at that time, and how he became ill all of a sudden by God's plan. There was a very special plan to bring it from Constantinople to Cyprus.
That's a long journey.
Long journey, yes. And he was hunting.
Even on the fast ferry boats, it takes a long time.
Yeah, so he was hunting in the mountains in Cyprus, which are called Troodos Mountains, and he got lost. And he came upon a monk who lived on his own in the mountains. And this governor was very rude to this monk. And when the monk refused to speak to him, because of course he didn't speak to anybody, because he had a lifestyle As a monk, silence, exactly. And he ignored him, and the governor was outraged, and so he treated him very badly. And he treated him badly. I don't go into those details in this children's book, of course, but he eventually found his way back on his own, and he went back to his house in Nicosia, which is the capital of Cyprus. And the next day he wakes up and he can't move. He's paralyzed by some very strange illness all of a sudden. And after a while he realizes that he's being punished for his cruel behavior to this monk. And so he gets his men to go and find this monk in the mountains so that he can ask for his forgiveness.
Make amends.
And eventually he finds the monk who comes to him, and by his prayers he's suddenly miraculously cured. So he says to the monk, well, I will give you money, anything you want. And of course the monk doesn't want anything that's worldly. He doesn't want money. And by a miracle, he dreams. He has a dream, and the Mother of God appears to him and tells him that it's all part of God's plan to bring this famous icon to Cyprus. And so what he has to do is to ask the governor to bring back this famous icon with him, but he has to ask the emperor for it. And of course, he says, it's not going to work. He'll never part with this treasure. He's never going to do that. So I'm not going to disclose the rest of the story, but the rest of the story goes along a similar pattern through a number of other miraculous events, and eventually it does come back, and then readers can read all about how this happens and how this famous icon came to Cyprus. And in fact, you can see it if you visit. And because it's felt to be so holy, most of it is covered up by special coverings.
A shroud of sorts.
You cannot see the face of the Christ child and the Mother of God. All you can see is the silver covering at the bottom. And it may be superstition or just the belief that it's too holy. There are all kinds of explanations as to why you can't see it, but it's there.
You have a third book in this series,
Yes, the third book is not about...
but with the same illustrators.
That's right. That's right. I have the same illustrator for the third book, who is Nico Ciocelli, who is a very wonderful fine art artist, and he's also an iconographer. And he's from the country of Georgia, not from the state, but from the country of Georgia. And I was very fortunate to have him illustrate this book too.
Does he practice Russian Orthodox?
No, it's Orthodox Christianity, and he's from Georgia. He has a studio in Doylestown, in Pennsylvania.
I used to live in Lansdale.
He's still here, yes, and he's in this country. And in fact, he's such a wonderful artist that he got his green card on the basis of being an exceptional artist, which is amazing. So this particular book, called The Legend of the Cross, is all about where the wood of the cross came from, the wood of Christ's cross that he was crucified on. And this is another legend, and it's part of a three-part legend, actually, called the Golden Legend, which some people regard as more of an Catholic story than it's not an Orthodox Christian story. But I've written it in such a way that it will appeal to all Christians.
Do you think you might write the other two portions of the myth?
That's interesting you asked me, because I actually started off writing about how St. Helena brought the cross, or found the cross in Jerusalem, and how she brought it to Cyprus, and I began with that story. But something in me kept telling me that I needed to go to the beginning of the legend as to where the cross came from, and I kept hearing in my head, really, or just thinking about a quote from Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah, about the cypress, the pine, and the cedar. And that is because the wood of the cross is thought to be made up of three different types of wood: the pine, the cedar, and the cypress. And so I researched it, and it took me a long time to research this book. And this was the book that gave me most trouble, actually. It gave me a lot of heartache. I had a lot of obstacles with this story, including how long it took to get into print. And how long it took for the illustrations to be done, because Nico had another big project at the time. It was another church project. In fact, it was an iconography project for a Catholic church. And he also developed some carpal tunnel in his hand.
Oh no!
And so he had to take some time off and recover. And so it took a long time to get into print, but it was worth it.
Quite the journey.
Yeah, it really was a journey, and in a way it was my cross to bear as well, because of so many problems, so many obstacles.
And then so, your most recent book, Tea with the Queen, is this related in any way?
This is nothing to do with these three books. It's actually, it came about from a workshop that I did with my writing friend and mentor, Judy Wolfman.
Oh, wonderful.
You probably know.
I do know Judy.
And this was a piece of homework. We had to pick a picture.
It's the best looking homework I've ever seen.
Yeah, we had to select a picture and write a story. So I picked a picture with a goose and 3 mice sitting on it. And so at about that time, my great aunt was becoming, or she was reaching her 100th birthday. And I wrote to Buckingham Palace so that she would get a card from the Queen, which she did. And her son wrote a letter at the same time, of course, so we both did it. And she had this birthday card. So in England, the tradition is that when you turn 100, when you write to Buckingham Palace, you get a special birthday card from the Queen. So when I wrote this story, I thought, wouldn't it be fun if you could also have tea with the Queen? Which isn't actually the tradition of the moment, but in fact people do have tea with the Queen for different reasons. For charity work, they get to have tea with the Queen. So I really made the story up. It's not true. And because I was also homesick, there are many things I miss about London. I was brought up in London. I put into the story all the things that I miss about London. The red pillar boxes and the red buses and all kinds of things like that.
Where can our viewers find your books?
These books you can order off Amazon. And you can also order Tea with the Queen and The Legend of the Cross from Barnes & Noble. And I have also recorded...
You have a special version, right?
I do. I have a Nook for Kids on Barnes & Noble with my voice, with my recording. And so people can listen to it on Barnes & Noble. And the first two, people can also listen to my readings on my podcast. I have a podcast on Ancient Faith Radio, and it was named after my first book. It's called Readings from Under the Grapevine.
We'll post that here for you.
And just one more thing that I wanted to mention about Tea with the Queen. There's a special dedication which makes it different from the other three books. The main character, Charlie, is named after a little boy called Charlie who lost his battle to cancer, to brain cancer.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Brain tumor. And he was only 7 years old. And I met his godfather through social networking. He's from Cyprus, like me. And he asked for my prayers some years ago because he had read my first book, Under the Grapevine. And he had asked for me to pray for him. And I was so sad when he lost his battle to this illness. And it's really to help raise awareness into brain tumor research. There is a charity that his parents started called Charlie Charges On, because he had a love for rhinos. And so the book, although it seems, that it's just about a story about mice, I'm hoping that it will raise some awareness there into this very important research, because in England it's very much underfunded. Only 1% is allocated to brain tumor research, and I believe in this country it's about 3%.
A little bit higher.
Yeah.
Wow.
But not a lot more.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing stories of your books.
Well, thank you so much. It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much.